like to call this April 8th, 2015 meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board to order at 9:02 a.m. Is there any public comment this morning, Mr. Tejas, that we have anybody signed up to speak?
No, sir.
Okay, item number 3. I'm going to turn this to you, Mr. Tejas. Discussion and action on the election of the CRRMA officers.
Thank you. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. So this item, as you know, we've tabled several times now as we wait for the governor to make his appointment for the new chairman of the Regional Mobility Authority. So what I'd ask, actually, instead of tabling it, if I could ask for a motion to delete, and once the governor takes action, then I'll bring the item back and we can have the election once we have a chairman in place, if that's all right with the board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being no further discussion. Oh,
I'm sorry, I missed who made the motion. I was asking for a motion. Oh, Ms. Melendez.
Ms. Melendez did. Mr. Parker seconded.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. Item number 4, I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at the minutes for our previous board meeting of March 25th. If so, I will entertain a motion to adopt the minutes of that meeting.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I will abstain since I was here for the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Enoch. Okay, item number 5. Discussion and action on a board resolution establishing scoring criteria and authorizing the issuance of a request for proposals for the infrastructure component of the El Paso streetcar project. Mr. Tejas.
For this item, I've developed a brief PowerPoint to walk you through, and you'll recognize some of the slides on this one. I want to do a brief update and walk you through the process for this item. So, as mentioned, actually, we're talking about the El Paso streetcar project, the infrastructure component. As you'll recall, at the last meeting, we went through the request for qualification submittals, and the board actually selected a short list that would move forward into the request for proposal component. What I mentioned last month was that we would be back this month with a request for approval of the scoring criteria, as we do with all of our procurements from the board, and also a request for authorization to proceed with the issuance of the request for proposals for this infrastructure component. So what we're going to talk about today is the procurement process in general, the procurement timelines, the proposed scoring criteria that I'm requesting, and of course the board action that I'll be asking for as well. So you've seen this slide or a version of it a couple of times now. This is the process in general. Going back in time, the streetcar project itself has been broken out into 2 distinct procurement processes. One deals with the infrastructure component. That's everything from the tracks to the overhead wires to any and everything, including the maintenance and storage facility, anything and everything excluding the vehicles themselves. Then for the vehicles, we have a separate procurement as well. Under the infrastructure procurement process, we had a request for qualifications, which has now been completed. As I mentioned, the short list was developed or approved by this board last month, and the request for proposals is next. That's what you have before you today. Vehicle procurement consists of simply a request for proposals, which has been issued. In this procurement, as with all procurements, the board identifies the selection criteria and scoring for each procurement, and each of these procurements will also include an evaluation committee that will develop a recommendation to the board, but ultimately the board will select the contractors for each of the procurement components. Here's a brief timeline. Again, you've seen this slide. It's been updated though. RFQ was issued in January, proposals received in February. The board identified the contractor shortlist last month on the 25th, and today I'm asking for the scoring criteria. We're hoping, if approved by the board today, that we would issue the RFP later this month, with proposals being due in May. The board would select an infrastructure contractor in June. Mid to late 2016, you'd have maintenance facility substantially complete. With mid to late 2017, the rail and guideway is substantially complete. So those are our goals. This is what we're looking at, the infrastructure procurement scoring criteria. So first off, there would be a pass-fail component, and that relates specifically to the short list group that has already submitted through and been approved through the RFQ process. And what this pass-fail review component really consists of is a review of the teams that were shortlisted and what those teams were made up of in terms of personnel, key personnel and the like, making sure that the team that was submitted originally made it into the next round. The concern here is obviously a bait and switch scenario where you use an A team to get in, and then when it's time to propose, you actually submit folks with less experience. So that's the pass-fail review component. Now, the firms can in fact submit new names, but the RMA would have the ability and the right to review and approve or not approve substituted members. So that's the pass-fail component. Once you get through that, then you'll go into the price proposal review and the technical proposal review. We are proposing that the price proposal consist of 80% of the total score, with the technical proposal consisting of 20%. So this proposed scoring criteria was developed by URS and was provided to the Project Evaluation Committee for review and comment, and some comments were received. I think what's important here is to conceptually note that this is a best value procurement. It's not a low bid, and that was intentionally done. This is a very complex project, so we believe that it's very important that the technical expertise and the approach that is being proposed be a part of this selection process. So that's why you see the technical proposal consisting of the 20%. Now, having said that, obviously the request for qualifications was a qualifications-based review, but now we're in the actual proposal component. We want to see who the actual team members are, what their actual plans are, so that's why we have that technical proposal component. Here's a little more detail on the 80 and the 20%. So I mentioned the pass-fail review. Major participants, key personnel have not changed, or we have provided written consent for a change. The DBE plan, the proposer information certification request documents are all included. So that's that pass-fail component. Price proposal we talked a little bit about. So that's where we haven't spoken about that. That's where we're actually looking for the schedule of estimated quantities, unit bid prices, add alternate items, and other applicable provisions of the RFP. So that's really the meat of it. That's 80%. So we're looking at score. However, the 20%, I would note, and again, this is best value. So the intent here really is to key in on the fact that a firm with a slightly higher price could still win this if their expertise and their the key personnel and management plans and all those sorts of things score so high, we could actually pay a little bit more for quality. But I think that's important because of the complexity of this particular project. So you'll see here some of the bullets under technical proposal. I won't read through them other to highlight a couple of them. The overall project approach, I believe, obviously is very important. The maintenance of traffic, I think, is going to be a big one because we have so many streets in downtown and so many activities going on downtown and elsewhere. So that's what you see there in the technical proposal. So what I'm actually asking for from the board today are actually two actions: a motion to adopt the selection criteria and the scoring that I just outlined, and we can go back through them if you have any questions, obviously. But then secondly, I'm also asking for a motion to authorize the executive director to issue the request for proposals and any associated documents and instruments as they relate to the infrastructure component of the streetcar project. So subject to your questions, I believe that's all I have.
Mr. Tays, before we have the discussion, do we need two separate motions, or can we handle them both?
You can combine them, actually. And in fact, in your board backup, the resolution is actually a single resolution.
Okay.
In fact, I'd mention also we have representatives from the URS firm here as well, if you have any questions about the scoring criteria, how it was developed, or why.
Mr. Carlsberg, he beat you to the punch.
Has to do with the best value procurement. With 80% on price, I think it probably emphasizes price over quality, and I'm thinking that those percentages ought to be closer to 50-50 so that you get a better spread on proposals received. Mm-hmm. You may want to consider looking at different numbers.
Well, the reason, and we can ask Mr. Berry to come and shed some more light on this, but the reason we went with the 80-20 is that the 20% actually allows for quite a great gap in terms of a gap between the highest and the next highest cost. So there is that ability. There is actually quite a bit of spread there. But beyond that, I think I would mention also the request for qualifications. That was the floor, right? So we used the RFQ to get those folks that onto the short list that we absolutely had faith that they could actually get this done. At this point, it's really just the 20% to get the team that's just a little bit more highly qualified than the other. So we believe that all of the firms in the short list grouping, the 4 firms, have the expertise and the ability to get it done. This 20% is really just to get that, just a slightly higher little tweak at the end.
Well, my comments stand, and I have one more question.
No, go ahead.
Is it possible to involve somebody on the board as an observer in the process when the looking at the RFP as it goes out, sitting with the committee when they review the RFPs, not necessarily as a voting member, but just so that the board's got a little more interaction?
Well, and to that point, and I don't know, Mr. Vice Chair, how you'd like to deal with this, but we actually added an item on procurement process later in the agenda, so I don't know if you'd like to open that item up now or in terms of discussing the whole.
Since it is relevant to this discussion, let's go ahead and.
Sure.
I think it's pertinent to this. Let's go ahead and Mr. Carlsberg, go ahead. You made a point there, Mr. Tejas. I think this board wants to roll up its sleeves. Individual members have stated they want to participate in the process more and not micromanage the Regional Mobility Authority, but to be a good aid for you and a good team with the executive director to make sure that the citizens of this community get the most bang for their buck. So
certainly. So if you'd like, if you could read item 7 into the record, we can begin discussing that. We'll discuss items 5 and 7 together then.
Item 7 is discussion and action on the CRRMA's process of posting and releasing procurement results.
Okay, so this is a result of some comments from the last board meeting that I received in terms of board involvement in procurements and how that works. So I thought it might be beneficial. We've got a couple of newer board members, so I think it might be useful to go back in time and show how we do these and how we got here. So we're going to talk about our procurement processes. We'll talk about background and oversight. We'll talk about board involvement. We'll talk about the process for announcing results, and then, of course, questions and discussion. So in terms of background, actually, there we go. In terms of background, what guides all procurements for this Regional Mobility Authority are the policies that this board has adopted, and they were last revised in 2013. So our policy for procurement of goods and services drives all of the procurements that we do. We also have Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program that, in essence, we've adopted through TxDOT. We have a business opportunity program and policy that we've adopted as well. And when I say we, obviously the board has adopted all of these documents. And Chapter 370 of the Texas Transportation Code, which governs specifically regional mobility authorities, drives how we can and do our procurements. I'd also mention that there are other applicable statutes that apply from time to time based on the type of procurement that we're doing. If we're doing a design-build project, then other applicable statutes could apply as well. Then lastly, I have a bullet there identifying the procurement page of the RMA website. What we do there in an effort to be as transparent as possible is that we post all of the past procurements that we've done, the current ones, obviously, that are available to the public, and we list out any future procurements that we're looking at doing so that the public and contractors have access to what we're up to. That last item there is a note, and it's a very important one, and that is that TxDOT oversight and concurrence is required on all procurements that will or may utilize state or federal funds. So whatever we determine to do in terms of a procurement, however we proceed on a procurement, TxDOT has to review and is engaged and involved in that procurement to make sure that they're able to provide concurrence on it. Otherwise, we can't access the federal state funds that we're using. And as you know, we're an unfunded agency, so most, if not all, of our projects are developed through state or federal funds. So that's a really important note. If we want to make any changes to our procurement, we'd have to get review and approval from TxDOT. And in fact, this note here drives why we do our procurements like we do, which are basically modeled after TxDOT. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the board's involvement in our procurement. So the board of directors obviously is the policy board of the RMA. You all establish, adopt, and revise all of the policies governing the procurement procedures of the RMA. So all of our procurements are done per your guidance through your policies. You all also authorize the commencement of a procurement. So no procurement begins without the board actually authorizing the executive director and staff to begin a procurement. And another addition to that is that the scoring criteria, as you're seeing under item 5, all of that scoring criteria has to be reviewed and approved expressly by this board before I can actually use it on any particular procurement. So you're heavily involved. And I think it's important to note that to really kind of flesh this out, what this really means is that you develop the framework for which all procurements are issued, but more importantly, you actually identify when a procurement can be pursued and what the scoring criteria are within that particular procurement. So you've established the framework and you give the parameters within which the procurement is developed. The staff, meaning myself and in certain instances outside consultants, are basically just following the model that you all developed. So that third bullet shows that once an evaluation committee utilizes the scoring criteria that you all have approved, then they develop a recommendation and it comes back to the board. The board then selects the winning contractor or consultant and authorizes the staff to negotiate an agreement, and ultimately that agreement comes back to the board for review and authorization for the executive director to execute it. So you're involved in every step of these processes. So this was an area that I think I understand there were some questions on, and that is specifically last month we had an item that had the identification of a shortlist for a request for qualifications process for the streetcar project. There was a question as to why the results or the recommendation that were coming forward were not posted online and made available to the public. So I wanted to show you what we do. Upon completion of the evaluation committee's development of a recommendation, the agenda item is posted for the next open meeting. A PowerPoint is developed, but it's not shared online as we do with all of the rest of our backup. In fact, it's actually presented to the board in the open meeting, and the PowerPoint is posted online, and the website is updated with the resulting board resolution after the meeting. That's done. That's really it's a model that is used by TxDOT. The issue, though, I think where we could improve, and I think I could directly resolve some of the questions, is that I could provide the PowerPoint to the board in advance. Not posting it online still, but still providing it to the board so that they have the ability to review that in advance of the meeting. Here's some notes related to this process as well. So as I mentioned, the PowerPoint, the results are not made public until the board meeting. The bidders are prohibited from speaking with the board until after the award, and that's an important point. Anyone that's involved in procurement cannot speak with anyone other than the identified point of contact, which is normally myself because I don't serve on evaluation committees. So I'm usually the point of contact for all procurements. And if there are issues that arise during a board meeting in which a procurement is being recommended or an award is being recommended, obviously that item can be postponed, it can be deleted, we can deal with it at that point. The challenge process for awards is built into every procurement that we do, and there are also challenge provisions built into our procurement policies as well. So if, by way of example, if a firm is unhappy with the selection, once the award is made, that firm can then avail itself of the challenge provisions that are outlined within our procurement, within the procurement itself or the policies themselves. And lastly, TxDOT has reviewed and concurred with this process, and in fact, has involved itself in most, I'm trying to think back on all of them, I would say most, if not all of our procurement policies, or procurements, TxDOT is involved in as an observer, if not actually involved in the selection. So I wanted to share with you a little bit on other similar agencies to ours. So TxDOT, with TxDOT, the Transportation Commission, which is the policy board for TxDOT, they are briefed in advance by staff, but they're not provided hard copies of anything, as I understand it, and the results are not released in advance of the meeting. So during the meeting, the public is provided very similar to what we do here. The distinction would be the prior briefing by staff. Other regional mobility authorities, it's a mixed bag with the other RMAs throughout the state. Some board members individually request private briefings in advance. Most do not, and most, in fact, actually receive the results as we do here, along with the public. And it's important to note, when I'm laying this out, I'm laying it out for context, not to say we can't do it, obviously, but that's how we've done it. Certainly, I'm open to whatever change the board is interested in seeing. And then lastly, the City of El Paso, as our sponsoring agency, we looked at them as well. The council is not briefed in advance by the staff, but the results are posted online in advance of the meeting. So I believe it's a Thursday or Friday prior to the Tuesday council meeting. There is a PowerPoint posted online that's available to the public and to the City Council that shows the recommended results. So that's all I have for you. I wanted to outline the background on this procurement policy, and then I'd turn it over to begin the discussion.
Before I give you the floor back, Mr. Carlsberg, and then Ms. Melendez, I asked Mr. Tejas to put this item in the agenda. Look, there's a lot of material here for us, and it's a little uncomfortable for a number of the members of the board to show up and to try and digest this and not even have any time at all to formulate questions. You know, the most dangerous thing is when the questions are not asked. And I think the public demands that we scrutinize everything, and we don't want to appear as a rubber stamp, and I'm not saying we're that, but there's a lot of information here that we need to look at before. And there's probably some really good questions that would come from members of the board if they had a little bit of time to prepare. So with all due respect to what has happened in the past, as we evolve as a mobility authority, I think that this board wants to be more involved and would like some time to prepare some good questions for you and or our vendors as we proceed along, because we've got some very large projects. And I can tell you, for instance, my concern with this streetcar project, there's not a penny more in this budget than what we have. So the worst thing that could happen is that we didn't do our homework and we end up with streetcars and $7 million in overruns not to complete the project. And this wouldn't be the first time that's happened in this community, but not on our watch. So we're real concerned about the information and the ability to review it prior to the meeting. So Mr. Carter, I'm going to give you the floor back because this is relevant to the discussion you brought up, and the board does have the ability to establish the scoring criteria. So if you chose to make a motion to amend that, we have the right as a board to do so. Am I correct, Mr. Tiss?
To amend the scoring criteria?
Yes.
Certainly.
Sure.
Certainly.
Mr. Carter, I'm going to give you the floor back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the comments that our acting chairman, vice chairman, Mr. Wardy made. My comments are based on a lot of input from the community. I hear a lot of things, and since I'm still relatively new on the board, you know, I have not waded deeply into these issues, but I'm beginning to get a feel for things, and the perception in a community, because we handle such great responsibility, needs to be, they need to be confident that we're doing our job. And a lot of the community has no idea that we even exist. But that being said, I agree with Mr. Wardy's comments. I also would like to see the scoring provisions, you know, revised, and I'll listen to an explanation as to why you've got the 80-20, but numerically it doesn't seem to favor the best value, because a 20% margin, that doesn't make any sense to me. You've got 4-to-1 against it. You know, you could be the most technically competent, but if the guy scores all 80 points on the low fees, no one else is going to make that up. You can only get 20% on your qualifications. So I'd like to, you know, I'd like to see the technical qualifications and the pricing a little more equivalent, so that the numerical selection reflects, hey, you know, we had a lot of guys right here, but the technical proposal was, it's got to be more than 20% in a 100% bracket to throw the job to the guy that's most technically qualified. I see where you're coming from, and I'd love to hear that responsibility. And the last comment I'll make, and I'll hold a motion until we hear an explanation, I think we should listen. But the last comment I have is, I think we should talk about appointing a committee to review the procurement process and to possibly propose some changes and back through TxDOT and whoever else we need to get clearances from.
Certainly, if that's the desire of the board, then we can. There are several committees that are already in existence with this board. So what we could do is we can pull the procurement policies and route that through one of the committees for review, if that's the interest of the board.
Okay, I think Mr. Carlser would like to hear URS's explanation of
Certainly.
the 80-20, if there's a representative here from.
If I could just close that item then. So I think what I'm hearing from the board is that the board would like to see the procurement policies go through one of the committees for review.
I think
If that's
that's
okay.
correct, Mr. Taylor.
Okay, no action is needed. We'll do that right away. So I'll ask Mr. Berry to approach the podium. The one thing I will note, though, is that, as Mr. Wardy alluded to, we have an extremely limited budget for this. So I think that's part of what's driving this as well. The technical component, we've through the RFQ, we've gotten a group of firms that we believe can do it, absolutely, without any doubt. Any of those four could actually do it. So at this point, the pricing, that's why you're seeing the pricing so high. But I still believe that the 20%, while it sounds really low, and Chuck, Mr. Berry will go through this in greater detail than I can, but that allows for a pretty big swing. So with that, Mr. Berry, if I could ask you.
Ms. Melendez has a question before Mr. Berry steps up.
I have a question on process.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dory, excuse me.
Before we go into the specifics of this particular procurement,
Yes, ma'am.
if we would like to see the PowerPoints in advance of the board meetings, is that something we can just discuss with you? Do we need to make a motion so that becomes standard operating procedure or part of this board?
I can do that. In fact, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. That was the other item that I wanted to close. So what we can do is I can provide those PowerPoints to you in advance. Whenever we're posting the agenda, I can provide to you all procurement PowerPoints and any items that normally are not distributed to the public until after the meeting. I can provide all of those to you in advance as well.
So
I don't believe that requires a motion.
Not at all.
Ms. Fenton.
we typically get those about 3 or 4 days before the meeting. Is that going to be enough for the board to adequately deliberate and come prepared?
I think when
I
you
hope so.
post the agenda on a Thursday,
Normally Fridays.
on Fridays, would that be acceptable to you? If he posts Friday, that he forwards the PowerPoints to us, so you have the weekend and a couple of days to review?
It's okay with me, as long as it's okay with the rest of the board. My second question is regarding individual member briefings. Can you just describe how other RMAs are managing those and what steps we could take perhaps to go down that path as well?
Right. Well, what you normally see on the individual member briefings, so if you take it back to TxDOT obviously has a huge staff, and what they'll do is they'll actually sit down with the commission members, and each of if they're interested in item 4 and it deals with tolling or something like that, the toll division will actually go and brief a commissioner. Obviously, we don't have that capability. It's me or one of our consultants that can do the briefing. But in essence, what the other RMAs are doing, there are a couple of them periodically, if a board member is particularly interested in a particular project, then the executive director, one of the staff members, will actually sit down with him and walk him through. Very similar to what I do with the vice chair now. A day or two in advance of the meeting, I'll walk him through the agenda items and explain what each of them are, so that there's no questions as we kind of move through it. So that's certainly available to you all as well. A day or two prior, I can walk each of you through the agenda item. And please remember, I'm always available should you have questions or along the way as well, whether it has to do with an agenda item or not.
You've been very good about being available. I don't question that at all. But in your PowerPoint here, it said some boards request individual member briefings as opposed to individual member requesting that.
Yeah, I probably should have worded that a little better. It's not the board requesting, it's the individual board members requesting a face-to-face individual meeting with the staff members.
Thank you.
Ms. Melendez?
Well, I would just comment also that Raymond's, Mr. Chase is very good about being able to just call him, pick up the phone, and ask him to explain and to maybe go further into an item on the agenda or something maybe even that you read in the newspaper. And so I think that's in place already, that we can pick up the phone anytime and call Raymond to help him, to help us walk through some areas that are complicated in many cases.
Okay, with that, I think we'd invite Mr. Berry to the podium.
Good morning, Mr. Tejas, Vice Chairman Wardy, board members. My name is Chuck Berry. I am the project manager for your El Paso streetcar project. I'm with URS Corporation as the project manager. Here with me today is our regional vice president, the project principal, also Jim Etherton. I'm going to also ask if he could state a couple of words to you. In general, I will stick to specific to your project, if that pleases the board.
Go ahead, Mr. Berry.
Thank you. Specific to this project, and trying to be specific to Board Member Carlsworth's question about how to balance the bid price with the technical capability, Mr. Tejas brought to your attention already that you have identified a group of firms or teams that are capable to do the project. They certainly presented the capabilities, both financial and technical, to be able to do that work. Now we're going to the project-specific level in this evaluation, and I ask that the board focus on best value. It's not just the most technically capable firm, but also it has been brought up before. We're working very diligently on keeping the project within budget. That very significant efforts to keep the total project cost within that $97 million. And this is a very major component to that total project cost, but there are many, many others that we've been working together with Mr. Tejas to help manage for the RMA. We looked at a range of scenarios, and the 80-20 seemed to be the best balance to secure both a good, solid bid that's capable of delivering the work, and enough information on that long list of technical capabilities that we would ask the teams to provide us a lot more detail on, giving that about 20 points out of the total 100 score. That appeared to be a good balance. We're working with a very small group of teams that are certainly capable to deliver the work. Now we're looking on how each one of them would approach the project, manage it, and how they would propose to address the long list of complexities that are on the project. Something like a 50-50 score could result in a very, very, very high bid overcoming a reasonable bid and overturning that, overcoming that point score. That's specific to the project. Now, I think with our much wider range of experience on a lot of other projects that have been typically design-build that URS has encountered, I think Mr. Etherton, Jim Etherton, our regional vice president, can give the board a real quick overview of how it fits into the big scheme of things with a lot of different projects.
Jim Etherton with URS.
Mr. Etherton, just a moment, please. Ms. Pennerbach.
Thank you. Could we get that slide back up that shows the scoring criteria? Thank you.
Is that okay?
No.
We need to go back. Let's go.
This one, or would you like the components
Right.
of it?
Yeah, that one. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Etherton.
Thank you. To elaborate a little bit further on what Mr. Berry was sharing, some of the things that are different about this project are that it's actually 4 projects, as Mr. Tellis has already elaborated on. You have the vehicles, but there's actually 3 major components of the rest of the project. That's the infrastructure that supports the vehicle, the maintenance and storage facility building, but another large component is the underground utility relocations that are required before you build the track and everything else on that. As a result, some of those components are very specialized. The track is very specialized, as well as the electrical system that's used, that's overhead, that powers the vehicles. As a result, one of the things that we're dealing with is we want to make sure that we have enough proposers to bid the job. If we only end up with one or two proposers, that is likely to push up prices. And so, again, we're very sensitive to staying under budget. As a result, even though we may have 4 or 5 proposers, you have some very important sub-consultants, subcontractors who would be on maybe 2 or more of those teams. So, for instance, a contractor who does the specialty work may be on all of the teams. So when it comes to the quality and how to differentiate quality from one team to another, sometimes the only thing that may be different is the top management of that team. So those doing the work may be the same, maybe an equality amongst those teams there. So we're trying to balance things out so that when it comes to the quality, we feel that we've probably vetted 80% of the requirements already, and it's that last 20% that we're focusing on. Again, making sure that there's not been any major changes from their last statement of qualifications. So our overall guiding principle is knowing that we don't have a project if we go over budget. So our goal is to have the best overall quality while staying under budget.
Well, honestly speaking, based on what you just told me, then I'm going to agree with Mr. Carlsworth that I don't think 80-20 would bring that, and my experience, unfortunately, is with the low bidder not being able to finish projects. I think that there is a huge fear that, you know, we don't weigh enough the technical part, we go with the low bidder, and then we end up with, like, San Jacinto Plaza and a number of parks that we read about in the newspaper every day. So I understand your comments, and I respect where you're coming from, but I'm probably disagree with you a little bit, but I respect you're the professional on this. Ms. Hiner, you have a comment.
I just want to echo the same thing. I haven't heard anything that says we shouldn't raise the technical component, and what I'm hearing, and I'm sorry it's my first meeting, but what I'm hearing from Raymond is that the proposers have the ability to actually make changes to their subcontractors. So I view the technical component as being a higher percentage. We might encourage even better sub-consultants to come on board and have those proposers come in with a better team that they hadn't considered before, because they know we are looking for somebody not only that can do it within the budget, but can actually get the job done and get it done correctly. So I want to encourage that kind of participation and to really see them compete on that level of technical. I think my experience with bidding is generally people know what the budget is. You're going to see them pretty clustered together. You're not going to see a large variation, and no proposer is going to go over what they've understood the budget to be. So I think what we're pushing them is to say we're holding you to a higher standard. So that's my comment on that. So I agree with you.
Thank you, Ms. Hiner. Any other questions for Mr. Etherton from the board? Mr. Carlsworth?
Yeah, I do have one question, and you know, we want to really be fair about this, and not tell you or ask, hey, you know what, we think that's a real neat story, but we don't buy it. And that's not what we're saying. My thought was to get a little more spread, and I believe Ms. Hiner got it, nailed it. I would expect these bidders to be pretty close. With the process that you've gone through, with the pass-fail, nobody's gonna get to the final without, you know, a real competent hard dollar bid. So the difference is going to probably be mostly technical. That's why I'm thinking 20 points out of 100 might be a little on the low side to get a spread. You've only got what, 4 firms looking at this point?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I'm just from a number standpoint thinking that it's numerically it might be a little easier to do, but the real question I have is, has this 80-20 been used here, and has it been successful?
Yes, it has. So we used 80, if I remember correctly, what did we use that for Americas interchange? I remember we discussed it.
I think for Americas you used 70-30.
Actually, 70-30. That's correct.
You know, I'd like to add to your comment. Let me get this formulated. That being said, you know, we have a number of people that can build, that can do concrete structures for us. This is a very specialized project, so along the line with some of the other comments here, the technical aspect of this, with all respect to what you've already done, continues to be a huge component to assure that we get it done properly.
And I think I would mention, though, that with the 80/20 on Americas, we selected a firm and paid $2.5 million more for that firm. So just as a kind of a point there, that's when you have a spread like that, that's one of the possible outcomes. And I remember that the board at that time had real discomfort awarding, once we had already gone through the RFQ, the qualifications component, everybody was qualified. They had some issues paying $2.5 million more for the firm.
Okay. Are there any further questions for Mr. Berry, Ms. Featherton? Ms. Melendez?
I remember my question from last. On the technical proposal, the items that you have in there, are those weighted in any way? Are they equally weighted?
There's a distribution of scores on the technical component that would comprise, in this proposal, 20% of the overall best value score. There's a variation of scores with the all that long list that we presented to you for the technical elements. There's each one of those has a sub-score.
Okay.
Mr. Tejas had asked me in a very general way, and I think I need to point out to the board, to date, this project has not released to the public a project cost estimate for your construction project. So I'm going to try and be as general as I can to respect your executive director's wishes that we not divulge that. But we have performed a sensitivity for, frankly, a range from 90-10 to 60-40, and I know 70-30, to assess that what would happen in the event that a very low bidder were to present to you a very mediocre technical proposal, and how wide could that spread be for a higher bidder to overcome the lower bidder, because they represented maybe 98 points out of the 100. Frankly, I don't know that you would get a 98, but maybe a 95 could be very possible. We tried to assess that for you and provide some advice to the executive director. Raymond and I conversed about that many times, and we worked very hard at trying to balance the two of them for you.
Ms. Henier has a question.
I have a little bit more of a comment than a question. I mean, I think I'm sensing a lot of discomfort from our, consultants saying, maybe 50% is pushing it too far. I think that the board overall wants to say, we really want everybody to know technical is key. This project has to be done correctly. It has to be done on time. And I'm hearing from Mr. Tejas that you've already done a 70-30, and that seemed to work, and it was a good project and concluded well. Maybe there's somewhere in the middle. Maybe we're not 50%, because I do hear what you're saying is that could get us in a situation where we might not be comfortable at all. So perhaps we should consider something that the board's been done before and pull back from 50%.
Okay.
In an ideal world, every one of your 4 invitees to present a proposal would present very high technical scores. We have to prepare the project for the possible variations from that. You've already seen in your history that 2.6 million, I think, was the difference in the bid estimates when we were performing this evaluation for you under that 70-30 scenario. And if I remember the details correctly, it could have even been wider than that. I think you awarded the board at that time awarded the project to the third lowest of 3 bidders, the highest bidder of 3, that was able to overcome the other 2 because of their very capable technical presentation. I truly and sincerely appreciate the board's focus on the quality, and it's appreciated, and I think it's very well placed. Now we have to work to balance, because we're saying it's a best value, and value does include the price. This is very much a policy decision of the board, and we've worked to try and bring you some objective information about how to do that, and also attempting to not disclose what we think the construction cost estimate is to date.
If I could just add one more point, and Chuck, Mr. Berry, if you'll correct me if I misstate this, but my understanding, though, is that when you go from an 80-20 to a 70-30, that range within which a higher cost bidder could win increases. Is that correct?
I think in our scenario, we compared, to try and provide Mr. Tejas some input, we performed a scenario where a mediocre technical score came in at the lowest bid, and then at what point could an excellent technical score overcome that low bid? A sensitivity analysis of sorts, not very, it doubled. I think from the 80-20 to the 70-30, I should say it almost doubled.
So I think what you're hearing then is the reason, instead of the 70-30, we went with the 80-20 because price is so sensitive in this particular project. There's a real concern. I mean, there are no additional dollars, whereas on Americas, there were provisions in the event that we didn't have quite enough funds, there were other buckets available. In this one, there are none.
Okay, but to counter that a little bit, Mr. Tejas, any project that has taken place downtown has run into all kinds of nightmares on unexpected situations in the field, okay, that requires a high level of technical expertise to attempt, in the very best situation, to head those off before they become a runaway train, okay? So we've seen it over and over again that there's not proper mapping of utilities, and there's all kinds of surprises when you work downtown. And we just saw it as a result on what happened here with the city working by the ballpark a number of times, just in this small segment. So I think that's where the board is ultra sensitive to the technical aspect. I understand, and Mr. Berry, you, Mr. Etherton, have made a very good case for that. So are there any more questions for Mr. Berry? Ms. Fennenbach?
For other streetcar projects and the scoring criteria that have been used?
When we looked for that, we found that most of the recent streetcar projects had gone to a construction manager at risk for its delivery. There was one example of a low bid, and your process is a hybrid of the two. We took the better approaches from the CM at risk to try and secure information from the contractors and include a best value bid in lieu of a low bid approach. So there aren't any other projects exactly like yours. And if I recall, we would have liked to go with a CM at risk, but the RMA does not have the legislative authority to proceed that way, so we created a hybrid for you.
And my second question is, how sensitive are we on the timing right now? I mean, is this a decision that we have to make right now?
Our schedule has the release of the RFP in this month. So it would begin to impact the schedule if we pushed it. Now, we could have if there's additional information or if the board is interested in pushing it, we could certainly absorb that and deal with it, but we've scheduled it for release this month. Now, it's the 8th. If we'd like to call a special meeting in 2 weeks for review of additional information, or if you need anything, we could certainly do that.
I think that would be prudent.
I could ask one question.
Ms. Yanner?
Mr. Barry, you mentioned that you performed or you evaluated a sensitivity analysis
Yes, ma'am.
of this. Is that a report that we could see before making a decision? Because I'm really having a hard time understanding how pushing that 20% a little higher has that dramatic of an impact to the cost. But if you've done a study and you've been able to share that with Mr. Tejas, perhaps when we see it, we can use that in making our best judgment of what's best.
I'll defer that answer
Certainly,
to Mr.
of course,
Tejas.
of course. And in fact, if that's the information you'd like to review prior to the
think-
special meeting, we can make that available to you.
I would feel more comfortable having that information and then coming back.
Mr. Berry, I think that handles it. I would like to thank you, Mr. Etherton, for your comments and enlightening us on this very difficult decision. So.
Yes, sir. And thank you very. And I want to reiterate, as your project manager, I really appreciate the focus on the quality. It is so rewarding. We worked to try and balance that for you and getting you the information you have today. Thank you very much.
So if I'm understanding the desire of the board, then I think what we'd probably like to do is delete perhaps delete the item, and I will provide that sensitivity report to the board members, and I'll work with you all on a special meeting date to call this item back, if that's...
I'll entertain a motion from the board for that.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this matter? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Okay, motion passes. The item is deleted for a special meeting in 2 weeks, probably be the only thing on the agenda. Would that be correct?
Well, we've been discussing a workshop of sorts.
Okay.
Perhaps we could roll it all together for a special meeting.
Okay. Okay, so that will take us to, that handles item 5 and item 7, so let's go to item 6. Is that correct, Mr. Tejas?
Yes, sir. There was no action on 7.
No action on 7,
So
and
item
we have deleted
6.
item 5, right?
Correct.
Item 6 is discussion and action on the provisions of construction management services as required for the El Paso streetcar project.
Okay, so this is a related item, obviously. What I thought I'd do is provide another PowerPoint for you all to give a little bit of background, and I should go back. There were several stages to a project, and one of those includes obviously the construction component. During the construction component, you normally an owner normally has a construction management firm or team. What I'm asking of the board today is for some guidance in terms of how to go about, or which group to use for construction management team. So I thought on this one I'd provide some background, the options available, and then a recommendation to you all as well. So again, this is on the streetcar project. Here's a little bit of the background. So the project itself came from the city of El Paso. The city hired the URS firm, Mr. Berry's firm, back in 2012. And that original procurement was actually a very broad procurement that actually selected a firm that could do everything from preliminary engineering and environmental to design through construction as well. So it's a very broad procurement. But back in 2014, as you all will likely recall, the city of El Paso actually assigned the URS contract to the RMA, and that's how we got to where we are today. Through the city of El Paso, they completed, and in fact, actually, here are the 3 main phases up on the slide. So the preliminary engineering and environmental, that was completed by URS for the city of El Paso. Once they got through that, and the alignment and everything was agreed to in terms of which car they were going to use, what alignment they were going to use, and that sort of thing, then an amendment was made to the original agreement between the city and URS to authorize URS to move into the design and bidding phase. So that was developed, and that was authorized by the city of El Paso. Once they got through about 95% of design in June of 2013, then it was time to move into the construction phase. And I should say really the bidding and construction phase. But at that time, as you'll recall, the TxDOT did not have the construction funds available, so it sat on the shelf for about a year, at which point TxDOT found the funds and awarded the funds to the RMA. So that's where the RMA stepped in the project prior to the completion of the design and prior to the bidding component. So at that point, the city provided the RMA with what we refer to as the interim scope funding of about $120,000 to keep the project moving while we were waiting for the TxDOT funds to become available. Once the TxDOT funds then became available, we accessed those funds to complete, or I should say update the design and get through the procurement, which we're currently in now. So that's how we got through that second phase. But the point there is that through the design and bidding phase, URS has been the consultant for the project. So that leaves the construction management component. So when we award the construction contractor, the project to a construction contractor and the vehicles to a contractor to do the rehab, we'll need a firm to do the oversight of all of those activities. So that's the question before you today, how you want to go about that. So I think ultimately we have 3 options available to you. The first is to issue a new procurement and go out for a construction management firm. The second would be to continue with URS because that original procurement by the City of El Paso was so broad and it was assigned to us with that in mind. So we could certainly continue with URS. Then the third option is to utilize the RMA's general engineering consultant. As you all know, we employ a general engineering consultant team that serves in effect as our engineering department. So when we have individual projects we issue or tasks, we'll issue what's referred to as a work authorization that serves under the master agreement with the general engineering consultant. So we have them available to us. In fact, part of our procurement process for our general engineering consultant, which we just redid this past year, has resulted in the selection of the same engineering team that we had prior. So we have that option available to us as well. Here are a couple of pros and cons, and obviously there's many more than this, but I wanted to kind of highlight some of them and help you as I request action from you later on in this PowerPoint. So option one is the issuance of a new procurement. The issue with this is that it adds time and cost to a project schedule that is already very aggressive. The alternative that was brought up on this one was perhaps we could utilize the RMA's pre-qualified list, the expedited procurement process. Unfortunately, that pre-qual list was really developed for almost run-of-the-mill roadway projects. It was not developed for a project as complex as this particular project. So really, and for the benefit of some of our newer members, we have what we refer to as the expedited procurement process, where we developed a pre-approved list of firms that are approved by discipline, and when we have a project come up quickly, we can pull a firm from that list, issue a very brief request for proposals, and move through that procurement very quickly. But again, the folks that have joined and been added to that pre-qual list did so on sample projects that were nowhere near the complexity of this particular project. So I'm recommending that we not issue a new procurement simply because a pre-qual list doesn't work, in my opinion, and more importantly, it would add time and cost to our very aggressive schedule. So that leaves options 2 and 3, continue with URS or utilize the RMA's general engineering consultant. Some of the pros with continuing with URS really focus around the continuity with a firm that is the most knowledgeable about the project. They've been involved in this since 2012. They have the expertise about the alignment and all of the issues that we're going to encounter. So there's a lot of value in that, I believe. One of the cons with using URS, though, is that they are the designer of record. And normally I would shy away, and I would recommend against using the designer of record as the construction management firm in the event that there is a conflict between the design and the contractor that is building that design. You normally want to have an independent voice come in and mediate that and resolve that issue. So that inherent conflict, I believe, is a big red flag for me. Then that third option is to bring on the RMA's general engineering consultant. That obviously would require time to bring our general engineering consultant team up to speed. We've got, as I mentioned before, a very aggressive schedule, and that would have an impact. But it provides that independence in review of design and contractor conflicts. So I believe there's value in that as well. So what you're seeing from me then is a recommendation that we take a blended approach, where we take the value of the URS experience and their involvement to date and blend it with the independence of our general engineering consultant. So really what I'm asking for is authorization for me to sit down with the URS firm and with our general engineering consultant team and knock out the different roles and responsibilities that are necessary to get us from here to the end of the project, and assign those among them and come back to the board with 2 agreements. One agreement for certain services to be completed by the URS firm, and another agreement for the construction management overall oversight by the general engineering consultant team. So again, the intent really is to have URS and have them stay on project. And I should mention too, just as a point of clarification, without regard to what the board decides to do, URS will continue with the project. They are the designer of record. So as conditions in the field require design amendments, URS will always be involved. That can at times be a somewhat minimal role. What I'm proposing is to increase their role in the remainder of the project, so that we're utilizing the value that they've developed in all these years of their involvement in the project. So again, it's a blended approach. It's a little bit unique, but this is what I'm recommending at this point.
Mr. Carlsberg, well, excuse me. He beat you to
I
the
got here
punch.
first. No, I agree with your recommendation. And being a consulting engineer and a contractor, and having represented owners, you're right. The URS has got responsibilities to carry through in the construction phase. I'm more comfortable with our general engineering consultant pretty much running the show, though. I mean, they review and inspect everything we do. I like the blended approach. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Ms. Fennenbach?
If we do go out for procurement on this item, how much time and how much cost are you anticipating that would add?
Well, because it would be professional services, we would have to comply with the Professional Services Procurement Act, which requires that qualifications-based selection, so you'd have a two-step. So I would say probably a couple of months at a minimum. If we were to try to expedite it, would be a couple of months for sure.
And cost?
That I couldn't tell you. I would try to do the majority of the work myself, but there are some technical components to this, so we would probably have to
Enlist our general engineering consultants to help us put it
there's
together.
the trick, right? That's the tough part about having a staff of one that doesn't have engineering expertise.
I meant that in support, Mr. Tejas, not to be sarcastic.
No, thank you. Honestly, I don't know. I would, if the board chooses that process, I would have to take it back, and I could get you a number, but I don't know that number right now.
Just to comment, I support that blended approach because I think it makes sense for us to rely on our JEC and then to bring the expertise of URS into this project as well because we're relying on them. So I support that approach.
Okay, it sounds like, do we want to take action today, or is there going to be a motion, or? Ms. Hiner, go ahead.
I would normally like to see procurement go out and give people an opportunity, but I think the complexity of this project, I think the blended approach you're recommending is probably the best. And I'll throw a comment in there that, as a lawyer who represents a lot of things like this, I think it's a really good idea to keep URS involved and bring in the existing engineering firm. So I would be supportive of that. I'd be comfortable making a motion on that today. I think it's the right approach.
Ms. Fennenbach?
Thank you. Because we are just at this meeting brought up, I think for the first time, the idea of having some of this information made available to us before we come to a board, we're more prepared to take action. And because we are planning on scheduling a meeting in just a couple of weeks, I would ask that we table this item as well so that we could deliberate on this personally and be more prepared to make a decision. I don't think that the 2 weeks would be an unnecessary delay.
Well, I would actually recommend action because it's going to take us a while to identify those roles and, more importantly, get to an agreement with these firms. These agreements are not quick template type, especially something like this where we're doing a unique blended approach. But obviously, if the board's uncomfortable, we can certainly postpone it. I will mention, though, it's really important to get a construction management firm on board as soon as possible so that they can begin reviewing all the documents developed to date. The RFP hopefully will still go out this week, and they'll need to review all of that before the construction firm comes on board. But again, if you're uncomfortable with it, we can certainly postpone it.
Would you like to make a motion, Ms. Fennenbach?
I would like to make a motion that we delay this action for the 2 weeks so that we can add it to the agenda on the special meeting.
Perhaps what I could do, if that's the desire of the board, then maybe in the interim, just so that we don't lose a full 2 weeks, I could develop the roles, at least so you'll know a little more detail in terms of the different roles and responsibilities that we're going to try to break out. I'm a little concerned about losing too much time.
Do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second that. I think that's a reasonable.
All in favor?
Actually, I'm sorry. Was that a motion to delete? Because if we why don't I'd ask that we delete that.
Okay.
And then I'll bring it back with the special meeting.
Your motion, you want to amend your motion?
I'll amend the motion to delete the item from today's agenda and add it to our agenda on the special meeting in 2 weeks.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 8, presentation, discussion, and action on the Cesar Chavez Express Toll Lanes Performances Report for the second quarter of fiscal year 2015.
So just by way of background, as you all may recall, each quarter we bring one of our general engineering consultant team members to you all to provide the last quarter's performance report for the Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes. Today we have with us Ron Fagan, who is from our general engineering consultant team, and I'm going to ask Ron, I don't know that he's met all of you all yet, so I'll ask Ron to very briefly touch on his experience and his involvement in operations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fagan.
Mr. Vice Chair, board members, good morning. Ron Fagan, Fagan Consulting. Briefly about me, I've been in the toll industry for about 18 years. I served as the Deputy Director of Operations for the then Orlando Orange County Expressway Authority, which is now the Central Florida Expressway Authority. And I came to Texas in 2005 to serve as Director of Operations for Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority. And I did that for 5 years before, on a dare or something crazy, started my own consulting firm. So we've been at this now for about 4 years. We are sub to Atkins on the GEC team. We provide expertise in operations and systems. Barring your questions this morning, I want to speak briefly about the performance of Cesar Chavez, and we'll look at transactions, AVI penetration, and for new members, AVI are transactions used to pay with a transponder, and we'll look at revenue as part of that process. So this first slide, the good news about this slide right away is we have had to add the 2,500 line. Originally this slide only went up to 2,000. So you can see that traffic is increasing. You can also see that it is seasonal. So when there are holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, traffic is much lighter. When school is out in the summer, traffic is lighter. The good news is, though, that it continues to trend upward, and February was, to date, best month so far. This item, or this slide, has in purple the actual transactions that took place in the lanes. The gold are forecasted transactions based on traffic and revenue study done in 2010. Again, you see the same seasonal reflections. You also see that traffic is not quite up to where the forecast had it. But if you look at November, December, January, those trends are in a positive direction. Again, February, a very strong month. On AVI transactions, again, AVI is paying with the transponder in the windshield. The other option you have is to have pay by mail, which is taking a picture of the license plate and going through that process. AVI is not where it was projected to be. There's not the demand at this point. Customers don't feel the need to go out and put down the $20 and open an account. A couple of things hopefully will influence that in a positive way going forward. Briefly, we're going to talk about going toward the court process, and those folks that like to use the road but don't necessarily want to pay may influence this as well, either by taking the folks that aren't paying off the road, then a higher percentage would be AVI, or hopefully encourage them to get an AVI account so that they can pay for the use of the road. The second longer-term item that will influence this, hopefully, is opening of Border Highway West. More toll facilities in the region, greater demand, possibility of a higher AVI. Pay by mail, the ability to take a picture of the license plate and through the DMV process figure out who this person is and send them a bill. If AVI is low, then obviously pay-by-mail percentages is going to be higher. So you can see, again, for actual transactions in purple versus the forecasted, and the pay-by-mail clearly making up a larger percentage of transactions to date. And the AVI penetration rate then, AVI transactions as a percentage of overall transactions is lagging behind forecasted, but again, for the two reasons we named earlier, hopefully that will improve near term with court, longer term with Border Highway West. So revenue, these bars represent three different areas. Expected revenue. Expected revenue means based on the transactions at the time in the lane, that is revenue based on the price that you would expect to see further down the road. Forecasted revenue, obviously what the traffic and revenue study said should be taking place at this time, and then actual collected revenue in the green bars. This is influenced largely, well, let's talk about December 1st. Early last fall, late last summer, TxDOT went through their conversion of their back office. Transactions were held all over the state. Our payment processor in the back office that does pay by mail had to hang on to their transactions as well. When all of that was sorted out, they began to let these out. And so there is about a 2-month lag, both in getting paid for AVI and getting paid for pay by mail. So this is the result in December of all of those payments starting to come through after everything was held for a period of time. AVI revenue, obviously, if AVI percentage is down, AVI revenue is not going to be as strong, and it is not up to where it was predicted to be. Pay-by-mail revenue, the inverse. More people are using pay-by-mail. We are collecting that way. The other thing to understand, too, is pay-by-mail transactions, as you know, have a premium. It is a higher toll rate than the standard AVI rate. The RMA also participates, gets a share of fees and fines that people pay to the payment processor. So between higher rates or the tolls and some fees and fines, you see a greater actual collected revenue, money that went in the bank. Life to date, the good news is it's a positive trend. Collected revenue is exceeding forecasted. If we get the court process going and people truly believe there is a reason you need to pay, you likely will see collected revenue at times exceed the expected revenue, again because of the higher rate and the fees and fines. That is essentially that presentation. Happy to entertain any of your questions.
I do have a couple of questions. Is there any way to project the average use or cost per user, or how much an individual driver is using the lanes, and whether they're paying by AVI or by mail?
Sure, we can. There's the ability to look at by license plate through our vendor, how many people are using the facility, how often they use it, how much money they're spending, the average. You can put them in ranges or a total graph individually, but yes, that information is available. The same with people using toll tags to pay. You can see how often certain tags are paying, and you can break that down. It's usually easier to do it in groups or ranges, but that information can be made available, yes.
And are you taking any steps to try to increase the registration for AVI locations? We talked about, I think, at one point.
I believe an effort was made to do that at some point.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I'm sorry.
How you can register for AVI more easily and make it more accessible?
We began those discussions with the county, but they hadn't really gone very far. The intent really was to utilize county offices throughout the county, obviously, and set up scenario very similar to what we've done with the City of El Paso through the one-stop shop. I think that once the Tornillo Port of Entry comes online, since they will be utilizing the transponders as well, I think that conversation will come back up again.
I believe also that AVI, there's a deposit. Is that it's $25 or $35? I think that you need to up front. And is that possibly a barrier to people using that? And are there options to that?
You use NTTA, Dallas's toll tag here, as your primary provider of toll tags, and they have two programs, I believe. One is to put $20 down and open an account, but they also have an expedited lesser amount of $10 if you want to do that. My years in the industry, folks either need it and want it and will get it, or they don't see it. It doesn't fit them. They don't use the road enough is usually the number one reason. I'm not there often enough. I don't want to put $20 someplace and not use it. So that's why I'm thinking with the court and with additional toll facilities, you will see an interest because there are greater opportunities for people to use a toll facility.
Are we still including some sort of a notice or in their bills for the pay by mail to say you could save money if you in fact get a transponder.
I don't know, the buck slips,
Including that?
is that continuing, or?
So we began, when the program began, we included, they're called buck slips. We included them for a period of time, and we've discussed adding them back every now and again as a kind of a reminder. Otherwise, if it's in every single bill, then people toss it and they stop looking at it. So we'll revisit that again. I don't remember if we set a date, but I know that we intend to. You know, I'd mention also another program that we actually developed under the prior chair was identifying the 100 highest users of the pay-by-mail process. We actually sent them tags, and all they had to do was call and set it up. And so these are users. They're paying for it. They're using the pay-by-mail process. They're paying double, twice as much as they should. I mean, these are real users, and they're actually paid up. Of that 100 that went out, 7 signed up. So it's a choice. They're making a choice.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay.
We need a motion to accept the report. Correct, Mr. Tejas?
No, sir. This is just informational.
Okay.
And this, along with the other PowerPoints, I should mention, will go online here as soon as the meeting ends.
Okay, item number 9 is update discussion and action on the court process for failure to pay toll fees for the Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes.
We'll turn this over to Mr. Fagan again as well. Just by way of background, a similar presentation has been made to the board prior. We're getting ready to initiate the toll violator court process, so we wanted to brief the board again, and hopefully we'll speak with the media and make sure that the public knows that the court process is here. But with that, I'll ask Mr. Fagan to brief you on the process.
Mr. Fagan, welcome back.
Thank you. There we go. Okay, so we'll talk about the court process, what it takes to get a person actually from the first toll bill not paying to court. We'll look at the code that allows you to have, or gives you the authority to do that, and we'll talk very briefly about the process. I'll answer any questions because some of you are relatively new and we went through this before, but I want you to understand. So the Texas Transportation Code 370177 is what gives you the authorization to actually pursue people who choose not to pay tolls if they use your facility. You have the ability to charge up to $100 per transaction for every violation or non-payment. What you are doing is what every other RMA in the state is doing, which is sending out toll bills. Bills may have 1 to however many transactions on them. If the customer does not pay that bill, you simply apply a $15 charge to the entire bill. They have 30 days to pay that. There is a grace period in there, and we can walk through that process. But if they get through the entire 190-day process and do not pay the bills, court now is an option for them. If they go to court, it is then sort of it is up to the justice how much they charge, and they can charge the person up to $250 and whatever court costs are associated with that. This elaborate flow chart essentially walks you through the process from a customer creating a transaction in the toll lane, being sent the first toll bill, first notice, second notice, into collections, and ignoring all of that and ending up in the court. What is key are the 5 diamonds, I guess, decision points. The customer has 5 opportunities at a minimum through this process to do the right thing. You're sent a toll bill. That toll bill, if not paid, turns into a violation notice, which adds $15 to that bill. They ignore that. They get a second one, which adds $15 to the bill again. If they go into collections, it is now an additional $30. So that bill, if they don't pay it, can cost them up to $60 fees and fines. MSB, who is the payment processor in the back office, has the authority to negotiate with people that they get on the phone to waive some portion of the fees. The idea is not to collect fees. The idea is to get people to pay the toll. You can see that it takes about 190 days to get through this process. What you all hopefully are about to authorize is the beginning of the pre-court process. That takes a little over 4 weeks to do. What happens now is they identify the people that are eligible to go to court. They begin trying to contact those folks and ask them to make arrangements to pay. They can pay the entire thing. They can enter a payment program to pay off over a period of time. At about the 15-day mark into that, the folks are sent a letter, and the letter doesn't say you may go to court, we may possibly file against you. It is sent to the number of people that the court has agreed they could handle if none of these folks comply and want to go to court. So the letter says you will have a complaint filed against you in the municipal court if you do not contact MSB and make arrangements. Typically, this gets a lot of people's attention, but if it ends up going to court, then somewhere about June, first week of June, we would file the first complaints on behalf of CRRMA with the municipal court. We do not have control over when the court would actually put that on the docket, so I can't tell you when those folks would actually go to pretrial with the court. But if approved today and we move forward, then we're looking at early June to actually go through the entire process with all these folks to be able to get them into court. So I skip to the next slide. We've had meetings in the past, last year, with municipal court to finalize all the documents, what they need to see in the evidence packets, how they need to receive it, their points of contact with the back office processor. The next step would be to start the pre-court process, which is calling people to say you have a debt or a bill you need to settle, and then sending the last chance letters we talked about, and ultimately submitting the first packets. Again, your process is extremely fair. There are entities that charge X number of dollars per transaction for violations. That is how you end up with these really scary numbers, thousands of dollars owed and things like that. We never wanted to go that way. Starting back at CTRMA, we wanted to be reasonable but fair, and $15 for the entire bill and 5 opportunities along the way to do the right thing. I think the agency then has done more than its share to try and do the right thing and give customers the opportunity. Answer your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Payton?
What is the cost of doing this collection process? When we think about the fee that's coming in, but what is the cost? And do we have a minimum amount that we go after?
The program is set up so that the only cost to the agency is 9.5 cents to review the image per transaction, or per transaction. So they take the picture of the license plate, the file goes there, somebody has to turn that into an actual ABC 123. By contract with CTRMA and your interlocal agreement with CTRMA, it's 9.5 cents per transaction. The back office processor takes 12% of whatever the total amount is that is sent into the back office. Everything, and you have a premium on that, so you're not losing on that situation. So it's the 9.5 cents per transaction. The $1 surcharge for the bill itself is paid by the customer. The $15 fine, if the customer pays, then 10 goes to MSB, 5 goes to you, and that process continues throughout. Even the court packets that cost $25 to put together, when the person goes to court, part of their fee is to pay for that court packet. So yours is essentially the 9.5 cents.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. Iner?
I would just like to know how many of the users actually end up in collections or are unpaid, what percentage? Is this a real problem?
In your case, you're asking how many individuals are in there. I don't know individuals percentage-wise. 45% of the folks are not doing what they should. And we talked about this. Part of that is they don't believe that there's a stick at the end of the tunnel.
This will be our first major collection action. So we're hoping it gets some play in the press so people know, hey, they're serious. They're going to come after us to pay. So this is the first time that we're going through with this.
Right. And it is inevitable that people sort of wait until the end. I really don't believe you're going to do anything. You haven't done anything yet. I still don't believe you. As soon as there's a real answer at the end, most people hop in line and do what they should do.
Thank you.
Just a comment. So maybe it would be wise for us to get something out in the media now before we start this process so people know that this is coming, and it is, educating the public as opposed to us. We may look like the bad guy when we start taking people to court. And so to get in front of that, to get the press involved and get some media attention to that before we start this process, just to educate the public to know this is coming, but you can resolve these by paying your bills.
I've seen that end with great results. The notification is another fair step on your part to say we are trying to help you, not hurt you. We're not here to harm you. We just need you to pay the tolls. And giving them advance notice followed up by actually going to court, yes, I think that's a very strong statement.
And it might also help educate individuals about getting that transponder, and that would put some more information in about using the toll lanes, and they have a choice, but when you use them, you can, your fee is less if you get that transponder, and then go back to the one-stop shop and let people know, here's where you can sign up. You can also sign up online as well. So that's an educational point, too, that we can be making, that it's an opportunity for us to educate the public.
I agree.
In fact, to that point, we discussed a press release yesterday, and we'll include all of the locations and alternatives, whether it's by phone, online, or at the one-stop shop. We'll include all of that within the press release as well. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan.
Thank you.
With that, I do think we need a motion to approve. Is that correct, Mr. Tejas, on this item? Or
No,
is
this
just an
again,
update?
this was informational. You can certainly take any action, but I
Okay.
wasn't requesting any today.
Thank you, Mr. Tejas. Item 10 is update, discussion, and action on the following items, projects, or reports. Item A is revisions to the FY 2014 annual audit. Item B is a proposed Metropia traffic management project. And item C is a report on the CRRMA's general engineering consultant team's use of local resources. Mr. Tejas.
Thank you. So as item 10A deals with the fiscal year 2014 annual audit, we have with us today Jennifer Kavanaugh, who is with the Clifton Larson Allen firm, who provides our annual audits. In fact, each of you have been provided a hard copy of the final audit. But I felt we needed to bring this back because, as you'll recall, I believe it was the February board meeting, we brought the Clifton Larson Allen folks down, and they gave an exit conference to the entire board and explained what was included in the audit and gave the final results. However, during the peer review of that final audit, there was a restatement made. So I felt it was important that Ms. Kavanaugh come down and explain that restatement to you. So with that, I'll ask Ms. Kavanaugh to come up, and we've loaded up the PowerPoint for her.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for having me back. As Raymond explained, during the review process in our firm, we came up with a restatement. So I wanted to go over that with you today because that's part of our required communications to talk to you about significant adjustments.
Ms. Kavanaugh, would you state your name and position for the record, please?
Yes. Jennifer Kavanaugh. I am an engagement director with Clifton Larson Allen.
Thank you.
Do I control this thing? Cool. Thank you. Sorry about that. This is just an amended presentation from the last time we were down here. As you recall, at the last meeting, you all accepted the audit and all of our required communications. So we'll just go over the restatement, which is our required governance communication. This details the adjustments that were made to we actually went back to the 8/31/2013 balances since we present 2 years in the audited financial statements. So the one I'd like to talk about today is the adjustment related to GASB 60. So the GASB is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which governs the financial reporting requirements. A few years back, I believe it was 4 years ago, GASB 60 was in early implementation period, and based on the reviewers in our firm and the experts in our firm, they felt that implementing GASB 60 was appropriate for the authority. Refer to my notes. We thought that approach, which resulted in the removal of a net deficit, was better for the authority and more accurately reflected the activity. So the activity we're referring to here was the construction costs with the toll roads. So what happened at that time was those costs were capitalized as an intangible asset. And now that it's been a few years and GASB and the people in our firm have a better understanding of what the GASB was intended to do, Our expert this year looked at it and thinks that the authority does not meet the criteria for GASB 60 with the service concession arrangement. Thus, we took the intangible asset off and changed the number to what it would have been had the amounts been expensed, 4 years ago. In addition, this year we recorded the entire $254 million for the pass-through toll agreement, and we talked about at the last meeting the amount where we wrote off the bond issuance costs, which is just, that's a new pronouncement, so that was not a correction of an error or anything like that. And so the net effect, in the end, it increased net position by $79 million. So without these restatements, at the end of 2014, there would have been a $73 million deficit, but the combination of all of these adjustments leaves a positive net position of $6.1 million. Do you all have any questions about this, or would you like me to go into more detail about any of this?
Are there any questions from Ms. Kavanaugh? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So next, we have the Metropia item. Let me provide a little bit of background on this one as well before we ask Ms. Hernandez to come up. So the Metropia project is a project that we had partnered with the El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization on. I want to say sometime last year. It's a program by which. And I don't want to steal too much of Ms. Hernandez's thunder, but really what it results in is an app whereby it's a smart app. So by way of example, if we're all here at this meeting and we want to get from here to another location, you would type in those two locations, and the app would actually distribute the traffic. So in other words, rather than putting us all on I-10 to get from here to there, some of us would be routed to I-10, some would be routed up Mesa, some would be routed elsewhere. So it's a smart way to deal with traffic issues. However, going back in time, the Metropolitan Planning Organization saw the value of this program by the data that's used to power the app. So the Metropolitan Planning Organization found some funding for the development of this program. But because the Metropolitan Planning Organization is not an implementing agency, they're a planning agency, they asked the RMA if the RMA would participate by managing and developing the project. So we agreed. Unfortunately, the funds that were identified last year had a fiscal year timeline with them. The project couldn't quite get all the federal approvals that it needed by the end of that fiscal year, so the project ended up dying last year. I say dying, that's not the right term. The project ended up moving into this next fiscal year. So I thought it was important because we have several new board members with us this time that the Metropia folks come back, present the program to you so that you understand what it is we're after with this particular project. And in the coming months, hopefully within 1 or 2 months, I'll be back to you with agreements between the RMA and TxDOT to access the funds, and then also an agreement between the RMA and Metropia itself to actually deliver the project. So hopefully I haven't stolen too much of their thunder, but with that I'd ask Ms. Zenia Hernandez to come forward and present the project to you all.
Good morning, Board. Thank you all for having us here again. It's good to be here. I wish we'd already have the project launched in El Paso, obviously, but I'm glad I get the opportunity to introduce the new members of the board to Metropia. The presentation is going to be a lot like you saw last time, but the one update I did want to make up front, and I think I have to state my name for the record, Zenia Hernandez. I'm serving as the program manager here in El Paso for the Metropia project. The one clarification I did want to make was that the project didn't completely die last year. So essentially the funds are exactly the same. They're still allocated for Metropia, just like they were last year. The only thing that happened was because we didn't have federal highway approval, we didn't make the fiscal year deadline, and so now we're going through the new FY 2015 fiscal year. But the funds are exactly the same, and I should state too that since then we've also made a little bit more headway with federal highway. In Austin, we've actually launched, or we're live in Austin now, And so we've had an opportunity to sit down and meet with Federal Highway, and so we think we've made some good progress. We've gotten some good feedback from them, and we think this time around, this project is now, right where they need it to be. So these are some of the faces at Metropia, and the reason I like to bring up this slide is to point out that the Metropia partnership actually started here in El Paso. So if you look to your top left, you have Dr. Yi Chang Chu, who's actually responsible for Metropia dynamics, the whole brains and nerves of the system. And underneath him is Jorge Villalobos, who's actually a local El Pasoan. And we have Mr. Jenta Chen, who's actually the Chief Operating Officer for Metropia. And I'll let him stand up.
Welcome.
So a little bit about us. Metropia is an incentive-based intelligent traffic management platform. And what I'm going to show today is that with one platform, we have one solution. That's why it's the Metropia Synergy Solution. You have one solution for many of our issues related to traffic. And we're saying that together with commuters, businesses, employers, and government agencies, if we all work together, then we can achieve those objectives and goals that we have in a more efficient way to get the most capacity out of our existing system. So the project goal or the scope for this particular project is to reduce congestion and mobile source emissions by activating Metropia Synergy Solution, no construction, traffic demand management. And while everybody's going to see the app, we are traffic demand management. That is what we do. That is the heart of Metropia. In addition to that, our scope also includes identifying opportunities to integrate the use of Metropia to improve border crossings and encourage transit use. And actually along with that, I should just say alternate modes of transportation. So that would include transit, walking, and biking. We should see some of those coming into play with Metropia by the end of the year. So this slide shows the different technologies that we've seen through the ages. But now with our smartphones, now we have access to new data, and that's why the MPO was so interested in us, because now we have accurate data, we have the best data out there available to us now. And what we're trying to do with Metropia is we have the model, like I said, Dr. Yi Chang Chu developed it. You can't get better accuracies out there. But we also bring in the objectives, the RMA objectives, the MPO objectives, the objectives of the region. We flush them through with our model. We pull out again that capability out of our existing infrastructure. And down at the bottom, you can see different pictures. And so some of the things we can do are event management, like for the Chihuahuas baseball games or Monster Truck Fair. We can do all sorts of stuff with events. Like I said, emissions, we want to reduce emissions here in El Paso. The multimodal, I talked a little bit about that. Over to the far right, we can do incident management. That can be your basic accident or your flood or something more serious than that. We also have an economic aspect to it, which makes it really nice. We have the incentives, and I'll talk a little bit more about how that works. But what's nice about it is that local businesses can come in and participate as partners and improve the El Paso economy. And the center slide just says our slogan is driving a better city. So wherever we launch, our goal is to improve the quality of life in that city. So I'm going to show you this video, and some of you I know have seen it again, but this is a little bit updated. And it just shows what the concept behind, essentially the concept behind the model. This is how it works. This is what we're trying to do.
Sitting in traffic congestion at rush hour. After a long day at work, you just want to get home. Instead, you're sitting in gridlock with no signs of moving anytime soon. Just like these grains of rice, vehicles at rush hour are all leaving at close to the same time and traveling the same direction. In the process, no one is getting anywhere. It's time we turn this around and rethink how we manage traffic flow. Metropia rewards you for leaving at less congested times, taking less congested routes, and even for using a different mode of transportation. Metropia's advanced traffic technology gives you new ways to travel to avoid time-consuming traffic congestion. When traffic is more evenly dispersed, the same numbers of commuters can arrive at their destinations in less time. A different transportation experience requires a different way of thinking. By working together, we can help solve traffic congestion and help drive a better city. Find out more right now at metropia.com.
So essentially what we're saying is that if every commuter acknowledges the traffic that we're each creating, then we can turn that acknowledgement into something where we can work at, right? We can take that responsibility and we can create something good rather than creating more traffic out there. And we do that by working together through what we call a Metropia ecosystem. So we have the local business component, we have the transportation agencies, and now with this data, now with our model, they'll be able to have better decision-making power in that you have more information, but also once you make that decision, now you get to see how it actually played out in traffic. Like we mentioned, commuters are at the heart of everything that we do. And then, of course, all employers. We're getting ready to launch up an employer program. We're just at the beginning of that. But obviously, we're saying it takes a community to change or to meet our objectives. And those objectives are going to vary slightly at every city that we launch. But like I said, our goal is to improve that quality of life. And what that means to each city will vary, obviously. But we take your objectives, take our model, and we can make something good happen. So the model itself, but essentially we have, it's 4 steps. So we're saying discover. We get data, we get private data, we get climate data, and obviously the data that we're capturing from each smartphone. And we feed that into the model. And so this is kind of what like you would see. And so you have your different departure times that you would choose. So typically, let's say you leave at 7:45 a.m. So now Metropia is offering a different departure time, and it gives you information now. So now you have information to make that choice. So using our model, we say this is probably what the time you'd expect in travel. And if you'll see it, that final reward column, obviously you'd get no reward during rush hour traffic, 7:45 to 8:15, because we want to change that time and space. So you reserve your time and you reserve your space on that route. What's really cool now is, like I said, now we have that multimodal component coming in. So now we're going to have the ability to say, give you a transit route. So not only is it a single occupant vehicle route, now we'll also have that transit route and even a walking route. So you could choose walking or bike to transit, take transit into work, etc. And we validate that with ITS. And Raymond talked a little bit about this. So maybe if you're familiar with other apps, what you see out there is this herding effect. So, or even in general, you're out on I-10, all of a sudden there's an accident. What happens? Everybody starts rerouting themselves everywhere else, and everybody tends to take the same routes. So now you're not stuck in traffic on I-10, you're stuck on Montana or something. And we don't do that. We load, we call it load balancing, where we actually load different routes, and then again, since you're using Metropia at different times, so time and space is different, and again, we're maximizing that efficiency. So we validate, like I said, using GPS, and then at the end, commuters will be able to receive points, and you can use those points for cards. It just depends on what merchants come in and offer those cards or incentives. What's really cool is this little tree here too. For every trip that you take, we track CO2 savings. So those CO2 savings, just like a little gas tank, it fills up. Once you fill up that tree, we plant a tree on your behalf. Those points also can be used for more altruistic purposes, so charity donations, community projects. You can. I mean, as far as what the capability of Metropia is, I mean, it's up to your imagination. Obviously, the scope of this project is very specific: reduce congestion, improve air quality. But the capability is huge. So this is kind of showing what you'll have. So we're going to have this mini TMC, this traffic management center. It's going to be standalone. But where the power actually comes in is when we start working with those partners and we start integrating, whether it be the city TMC or text.tmc, and then using that existing ITS infrastructure that you already have out there too. Again, just pulling that efficiency. And here's an updated video, just to make sure that it was clear how we use Metropia, and I think it's a lot more fun to watch the video than listening to me.
You've got things to do, places to go, people to see. But so does everyone else. And we're all competing for space on the roadways at the same time. Every time you're stuck wasting time and money in traffic congestion, you probably say to yourself, why didn't I leave at a different time or choose a different route? But maybe you just didn't know how. Now there's Metropia, the app that works like a crystal ball by coordinating you and other drivers to avoid traffic congestion before you're in it. Metropia gives you the best future departures that save you time. Metropia also gives you reward points for each trip it offers. You then make a reservation for that time and route. Knowing your reservation, Metropia will inform and coordinate other users to take other, less congested times and routes. The best part is that the more people who work together by using Metropia, the better it gets in coordinating all drivers. With enough of us working together, we could actually reduce traffic congestion in our community. How cool would that be? What's more, the points you earn, you can use yourself or donate to a valuable cause. Download Metropia today and help drive a better city.
And we have a few studies around the country, and one of them that kind of ties into this video is one we did in, actually we did one in Texas and one in LA, where it says you don't need every commuter using Metropia, you just need 10%. And once you hit that 10%, we start to see improvements for the entire system, not just Metropia users. So what do you get for this, for the cost of this project? We call it the Metropia Synergy Solution. Like I mentioned, Metropia Dynamics is the brains, the nerves of the system, and that was developed by Dr. Chu. But we also have Metropia Mobile, which is what we've spent the most time talking about. But we also have this Metropia Agency Solution. It's that data, it's those analytics now that supports your transportation decisions. And then finally, that Metropia Business Solution. And it, like I said, it can be local merchants. We can do employee programs, or it could just be people who are just interested in doing social responsibility. So even corporate sponsors can come in just because they're wanting to set that example of social responsibility, environmental responsibility. These are the different project phases. So overall, we're looking at about 10 months of just developing the app, launching the app. By the time we get to phase 3 at the end of those 10 months, we essentially want it to be robust, and we just want it to keep building on itself. And that's what we leave you with today. So it's not just 2 years and it's done. Metropia, because you are getting that synergy solution, you'll still have that ability to look at traffic, to analyze that traffic, and again, to essentially to sustain itself through that use of those partnerships, those private partnerships. And this is the total project cost that we're looking at. And if you'll note, the Metropia private sector infusion is actually almost $500,000. And that includes the 20% match. And this number that you're seeing, the $467,600, is slightly different from the one you saw last year. And the reason for that is that we've added an additional $100,000 to cover the incentive program. That was one of the reasons that Federal Highway wasn't comfortable at this point going through with the project. They needed more information, so we went ahead and, for time's sake, we went ahead and infused another $100K in there so that we can manage that incentive program. The rest of it, it's essentially your 20% match. So 80% federal share, 20% local share, but Metropia is providing that local share. And that's just to show we want El Paso, we're interested in being here. Our partnership started here. We want to do this here. So deliverables by phase, we have essentially 3 different phases. The one I want to point out again is that Metropia Synergy, that you'll still have that. You get that. and you'll be able to use it even after the project is complete. The other big things are this, the border crossing and transit integration recommendations. And that's part of Phase 3, evaluation report and data. So that would be number 3. And those are the big ones I wanted to point out. So like I said, how we use Metropia is up to our imagination. But what we're looking at right now through the scope of this project is to reduce that congestion on our El Paso network. We just want to get down to the basics, reduce congestion, improve air quality, manage that capacity, maximize the system that we have. And obviously, too, because that is part of our ecosystem, is to promote local businesses. And I said increase future border highway West Express lane utilization. That goes obviously for the whole roadway, but obviously in times of construction or like you have Mesa coming up. So when we have that integration with transit, then all of a sudden we can make bigger impacts. Okay. Yeah, so that's essentially it. So do you have any questions for me?
A couple. How will you create a baseline to measure the results in
Right,
those
that's-
areas, air quality, and how are you going to measure
Right.
congestion? I mean,
The baseline is already part of the model. So yes, every time, I mean, we can't just say you're saving CO2. That we have a baseline set up, and that's just based on averages. But yeah, of course, we'll have the baseline, and then that's how we track that time savings and that air quality savings.
and accountability to say, yes, we met them or not met those goals. I mean, we'll be accountable to show the results of.
Right. We don't have any specific metrics at this point. But of course, in the planning or scoping, maybe once we actually get a project, that would definitely be something that would come into play. What, exactly like you're saying, what metrics and what numbers would that mean? So yes, that's something that we would bring in
And I see
upfront.
that you're Windows-based, you're not Apple-based, or do you have an Apple? Because, I mean, that's very prevalent. I mean, is it going to matter for those that have Apples?
No, I'll let Jenda talk more about it because he deals more with the development of it. But yes, we're available on. You can actually download the app right now
On an
on Apple. Yes,
Okay.
you can download it. It's not going to be live in El Paso, but we can download it now. So you can look at it if you like.
Good. Well,
I think that answered,
let's-
I think that
yeah,
answered the
is-
question.
Okay.
Les just showed me, right?
It was just specific for Apple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Parker?
There's your app. I noticed on this that you're in Austin and Tucson, is that
That's
correct?
right. That's right.
What are the results of your operations in those two cities?
The results.
Do you have results, data that we could review?
Again, I'll defer to Jenda since I'm not the program manager out of Tucson or Austin. But I will tell you it's going to be slightly different, again, because we're taking those objectives for that specific city. So in Austin, they actually are focusing on one corridor. They're focusing on the impact on MOPAC. That's it. Ours is slightly different. Ours is regional. Ours is border. Ours is transit. So ours is going to be, the metrics are going to be slightly different. So as results, I'm almost, I guess I'll head the question back to you and say, what kinds of results, like how many people are using the app? Is that what you mean, or?
Well, one would think that if you installed a program and then watch it operate, you would have some data that you study, and you could use that data to show the effectiveness of your program.
Right. And we don't have a formal launch yet. I believe the formal launch is going to happen in Austin, but we have done some preliminary stuff. So one of the big things that we just did was South by Southwest event management. And so we were able to sit there in the traffic management center, and we were able to get users or commuters in and out of South by Southwest. And as far as I heard, everything was successful and went well, and they've actually invited us to sit next to them to continue event planning. Some of the same stuff is happening in LA too, and Tucson just launched this month, so we don't have a lot. And I'll let Jenda talk more to Tucson since he's out of Tucson. But
I'll be going through Tucson several times over the next number of weeks, so I'll
You'll get to
try
use
out
it
for
and
you.
see it. You'll get to use it. Awesome. Jenda, did you want to talk a little bit to Tucson and Austin?
Just to share with you our up-to-date progress from our launch in Tucson. So we launched the Metropia product on March the 18th. Within 1 month so far, we have rapidly get more than 2,000 users. And for a small commuting group in Tucson is amazing. So at this point, it's too early for us to say, are we successfully accomplish our goal with regarding to congestion mitigation? But we successfully did see start to about 6 to 7% of our total users start to shifting their traveling behavior. Stop the guesswork and using a different time, different route, and helping to drive the changes. I think this change will become, phenomenally important for a community that with, the local event planning or for college town like in Tucson. It's critically important for the seasonal demand surge. We are able to work with the Piedmont Associate and Government, which is the NPO in Tucson, proactively to base on not only the historical traffic and the traffic demand and the real-time information. So we synthesize the data combined together with the real user. So we are able to optimize the utilization of the existing roadway. So it's a very exciting project. They're more focused on the travel demand analysis rather than congestion, because it's hard to make Tucson community people believe that we do have a traffic problem on there in Tucson. Actually, we do not. But there is indeed, when there's our major event and seasonal traffic, demand injected into the city, there are still major issue with the optimization for the entire network. So we'll be loving to share continuously through our website and the public communication about our progress in the 2 cities. Very soon, by this summer, we'll have 5 cities, including New York and potentially LA and Houston coming on board. And we're talking about the next innovation, not only to bring a faster route for you to get home or get to work, but also how we driving behavior to bring the safety element for people to drive safer and the less road ragers, stuff like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chen.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Tejas, item C.
Phoenix needs worse than Tucson.
Yes, sir. So that we are almost through. We've got one final PowerPoint for you. And this, you all may recall, each quarter, the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority, obviously the board is very interested in use of local consultants. So each quarter, the Regional Mobility Authority's general engineering consultant provides a presentation to the board in terms of identifying the amount of funds it received and the amount of local resources it used with those funds. So today we have with us Mr. Greg Blake from the Atkins firm, who leads the general engineering consultant. He's going to provide the quarterly report for you.
Thanks, Raymond. Vice Chairman, board members, thank you. Try to keep this brief. As Raymond mentioned, this is the quarterly report for the last 3 months for the use of local resources here in El Paso. The first graph, I'll back up. Last time I presented, I had the quarter-by-quarter numbers in front of you and the graph below. I've split it up this month so that we can actually see the numbers are getting a little congested as we go quarter to quarter. We might have to, with your input, condense some of the older historical data so that you can focus in on what's going on in the more recent months. As you see, we're filling up a whole page here. But what you'll notice here, what I wanted to highlight, over the last 3 quarters, from May of 14 through January 2015, with the use of local labor here in El Paso, we've been increasing that percentage or keeping it flat. There's been several projects we're working on where we have a lot of toll operations specific technical expertise that's coming from out of town in Austin, in the Dallas area. But I suspect through some of the design activities we're going to be doing with the CMP that's going to be rolling out here in the near future, as well as work on America's Interchange that we're finishing up that last ultimate piece for some expansion on the I-10. That's going to bring that local percentage back up closer to 50%. And some months might exceed the 50% mark. So with that recent last couple of months, we've gone from the 50-50 overall to where it's a takeover on, it's 51% now non-local, 49% local employees. It's a bit of a change from last month where last quarter we were still at 50-50 overall. This is just a graphical representation of the same information. The blue represents the local participation, and the green bar is the non-local. And like I mentioned on the last slide, we're going to have a tick up in utilization of local here in the next couple of reporting periods. On the firm summary, one thing I want to point out, in the last report, which would have been for through the end of November, I had an error on, if you look at the Fagan Consulting line, we had a data entry that put $12,000 under local, so that's been corrected and will be continued in the reports going forward. Fagan is based out of Austin. He's got employees spread out all over the country, but currently no employees in El Paso, so that's been corrected. And again, here, this just goes down by the various GEC firm members, and if you look to the far right, you can see the percent participation by each firm. So subject to your questions.
Is there any questions?
The information I have for you today.
I do have a question.
Ms. Hunier?
Maybe this is a basic question, but
Yes, ma'am.
how do you define local labor? Are you using companies whose employees 100% live in El Paso, or are you using companies who have an office here who use employees that are out of the city? I'm just trying to understand what the term local labor means to you.
Right. I should have started with that. I apologize because this is the first presentation you've seen on this topic, and this goes back probably to when we started this in 2012, Raymond.
It does.
I think was the first one. And the decision was to, what we're presenting here, if there's an employee for a company, and I'll use Atkins or Jacobs as an example, we're international firms. We have offices all over the world. We also have, in Atkins' case, an office here in El Paso where we have several employees located here. So we count the employees that are working here, living here on a full-time basis as local labor. We do not, like myself, I'm based in Austin, so my numbers are located in the non-local column. Okay. And that's the criteria we've used consistently.
If I could touch on that as well. This was developed at the board's direction when the board, I should mention, this is and as you know, many of the local governmental entities here struggle with this issue in terms of how do you define it. Some have defined it such that a Walmart is actually considered local, that sort of thing. So the board was struggling with that, and I think in the end they decided to focus really in on what they were referring to as local impact. So the local impact is what we're really monitoring here through what Mr. Blake described. So it's really of the firm's members who are actually living here, paying property taxes, buying from Albertsons and doing that sort of thing. So that's what we're quantifying here.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Anything
Are there any other questions for Mr. Blake? Thank you very much.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I think that concludes our business for today, Mr. Tejas.
That's correct. I have nothing further.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned at 11:05 a.m. Thank you.